Effie Olsen knew it was just after sunup before she opened her eyes. She'd spent the first 17 years of her life on Alder Isle, and even though she'd been gone for another 16, she could still tell time by how the island sun felt on her skin. If Effie had to guess, she'd put it at just before 5 o'clock. The late May morning light was bright and insistent, overly cheery in the most obnoxious way. 4:59 a.m. was too early for optimism, but try telling Maine that. Or more specifically, try telling that to an island off the mid-coast of Maine with a full-time population of 1,500. An island that was once quiet and uncool, but was now ballooning with tourists for much of the year. Tourists who'd booked their reservations months in advance for one of the country's best new restaurants. Effie had woken up on an island that was 8 miles long and 7 miles wide. An island that was hard to get to and damn near impossible to leave. An island that ignored the fact Maine was supposed to have foggy, gray mornings. Effie rolled over and groaned. Her head was pounding and her mouth felt dry. Eyes still shut to the world, she reached for her phone on the nightstand, except, the nightstand wasn't there. Her hand fell to the side of the bed and touched exposed mattress. There was no fitted sheet, and Effie recoiled at the realization. Ew! A jersey knit sheet was crumpled down by her feet. Shitballs. She understood she wasn't in her childhood room, but there was no good reason for that. Where was she? Her mind raced, although the dull heaviness in her skull made it hard to think. She pulled her knees in close to her chest, curled up like a rabbit in a warren, and tried to piece together the last 24 hours. Her plane had landed at the Bangor airport after flights from San Francisco to New York to Maine. Her father, Samuel, and her younger sister, Ingrid, picked her up with a steaming travel mug of milky coffee and a bag of pizza-flavored combos. Which was a sweet throwback to her favorite teenage breakfast, but come on, Dad. Heard of granola? Sophomore year Effie would have happily eaten a whole bag of cheese-filled crackers before 9 o'clock a.m., but 33-year-old Effie preferred to live by structured, sensible rules, with apparently the exception of waking up in strange bedrooms after a day of cross-country travel. On the drive from the airport to the coastal town of Rockland, Effie and her father and sister danced politely around any real conversation until Ingrid blurted out the question Effie had been hoping to avoid. After 16 years away, why'd you come home now? Effie pointed out how she'd come home for Ingrid's high school graduation and for a handful of Christmases, how both Ingrid and her father had visited her in New York, in Italy, and in San Francisco, where she'd been working as a professional chef. She didn't have the heart to tell them that she had returned this summer, for the whole summer, out of desperation only. She didn't have words gentle enough to explain that Alder Isle always felt too small and a little stifling to her big career goals. And she didn't have the courage to tell them she'd just gotten fired from her dream job. She had too much pride to admit that after years of globetrotting with a knife bag and a few chef's coats, she was finally, undeniably, very regrettably broke, and that she was fresh out of backup plans. Even now, in this strange bed, she wondered if she'd find the courage to be fully honest before September rolled around. When they reached Rockland, her dad drove his truck right by an enormous queue of cars. Although the ferry had been booked days ago and there was no more vehicle passage available, dear old Dad sometimes played poker with the ticket scanner, so they were allowed to squeeze onto the mid-morning boat. On the 2-hour ride to Alder Isle, Effie successfully diverted every question about herself, instead coaxing Ingrid, a Generation Z financial prodigy who worked as a strategy consultant for one of the big crypto companies, to explain once again what an NFT was, and asking her father to share the updates from Meadow Sweet Scoops, his ice cream shop in town.